Hey everyone, glad to be with you all tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation. I'm here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment, and yeah, we're going to let her rip.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation. So the way we do things is that I give my opening remarks, which are then followed by a roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if you've got something you would like to have me address in the second half of our program, there are now three ways that you can send questions for the second half of the show. The first way is if you're watching on the Rumble, you can send me a Rumble rant. The second is to Cash App me at CalebMoppin22 on the Cash App. The third is via buymeacoffee.com, Caleb Moppin. All three of those ways are at your fingertips. You can send me a question in any of those ways. I will get them and I will answer them in the second half of the show. You can send it via Buy Me a Coffee. You can send it via Cash App, or you can send it on the Rumble rant. So I recommend that those of you that are watching live send a question because you have the power. Not many people watch this live. The majority of people watch this afterwards. So if you're one of the people who watches this live, you are very, very powerful because you have the ability to influence what it is that I talk about on the show. So I urge you to use your power and get me talking about something that is very, very important to you in the second half of the show. As far as announcements, join the Center for Political Innovation. Become a member today. Go to our website, cpiusa.org, and become a member. Our membership is rising. We've had 3 new memberships in the last week, which I'm very happy about. We're steadily increasing as people see that we are doing the work. We're building the anti-imperialist movement. We stood with Uhuru. We've been out in the streets standing in support of peace talks with Russia. And we just had a great convention and we got all kinds of great plans in the works. Great things are happening. So join CPI. Once you join, you'll get emails inviting you to our weekly membership meeting on Saturday. Check your spam folder to make sure you've received those invitations. Once you come to a weekly meeting, then from there, we can connect you with people in your area. We can also connect you with the national signal chat and all of that. It's a process, right? So I would encourage you to become a member today so that you can get involved in our great activities, right? Which are getting quite a bit of attention. The protests that we did around the country, which I'll be talking about shortly, around the country, we did these protests to support the peace talks, and those protests are getting quite a bit of attention around the country. So, all right. So as I said, first opening remarks, followed by the roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. We find out who's watching, who's on the other side of the camera. Then from there, I answer your questions. Questions can be sent via Rumble rants on Rumble, Caleb Moppin22 on Cash App, or Buy Me a Coffee. Please ask me good questions. Get me talking in the second half of the show. Thank you for that. So as I mentioned, we did have protests all over the country. They're not really protests because we're not opposing something. There were manifestations, demonstrations showing support for the peace talks with Russia in Alaska. We're still going through the videos of it. I compiled one bit of video that we put up on Twitter, and it actually got quite a bit of circulation. It's up to 304 retweets, which surprised me, but hey, I'll take it. You can take a look at that. I'm still waiting for footage from Minneapolis and from San Diego, where we've got protests. The Minneapolis protest just finished recently. And we've got a protest that happened in San Diego, and I'll be editing everything together. But as of now, this shows a number of different cities where we have people in the streets. And then John McCarthy, our member in Chicago, filmed Gabby, our leader in Chicago, the captain of Chicago CPI, Gabby, in the streets. And we now have this great video of Gabby just killing it in the streets of Chicago on Saturday. So take it away, Gabby.
Russia. We need peace talks with Russia. No war with China. We need peace in everywhere. This is a global action. This needs to be talked. And I know the media does not talk about this, and this is an important issue. They're gonna say how could he talk to Putin? Oh my God, Putin. Okay. No, it's NATO that's the problem. NATO is the problem, not Putin. It's a joke. We don't need to say that we do not want a World War III, and we agree with this peace talk between Trump and Putin. This is something that needs to happen. This is telling me that there is a chance for America, a new America, to work with BRICS. This is a chance for us. This is a chance for the American working class people. We need to pay attention to this. This is more important than this other media stuff and your hip hop and your other music. This is what you guys need to pay attention to. The working class families in America are failing. Meanwhile, other countries are thriving because they're pulling away from NATO and they're paying their tax dollars in their country. Meanwhile, in Chicago, our infrastructure is failing. This is why we need a government of action that fights for working families. We need a government of action that fights for working families. So this is why we're here, because this is important. None of that hip hop, none of that other stuff that you hear about, the ice fights and all of that trash, that's not important. This is important. This is what you guys need to pay attention on and keep your eyes peeled, because this is going to affect your livelihood. I know you guys seem like whatever, but it is something important. It affects your tax dollars. It affects everything you do in this country. And I know you guys don't care, you guys on the phone, everything, on Instagram, but this is something that we're out here fighting for. We need a government of action that fights for working families. We need a government of action that fights for working families. And this is what the Center for Political Innovation is here for. This is for the working families of America that never had a chance. This is for us now. So we're doing this for you guys. This is for the American tax-paying person, civilian. This is for you guys. We are fighting for the American people, the working class people. No more wars. End the wars. We can't afford the wars anyway, so why are we getting involved with that? Tell Ukraine to fix that. That's their problem, not ours. Russia is not our enemy. Russia is not our enemy. Russia is not our enemy. Russia is not our enemy.
Yeah, that's Gabby killing it. Great stuff. Yeah, she's got a sign, a draping flag, and she's talking into a bullhorn. That is multitasking. Yes, it is. That is multitasking. Gabby is very good at it. I might as well, while we're waiting for people to come on in, I might as well just show the video of the compilation that I did of the different places. Now, we've got video from Minneapolis that we're going to add. And we also have video from where is it? We've got video from other parts of the country we're going to add from, but this is where we're at so far. And this will just show you the different cities where the Center for Political Innovation had a street presence. And, we had, I think, an effective day of action around the country. And I am proud of that. So yeah, I was digging. Gabby is getting better and better on the bullhorn. She can kill it. She can get on the bullhorn and she just lays it all out there. So yeah, this is kind of a roundup of the different parts of the country where we had events. There's going to be a longer version of this that comes out that includes Minneapolis, that includes what you just saw from Gabby, that includes San Diego, but this is most of the cities. This is what's been going around Twitter. That got over 300 retweets on Twitter already. Was retweeted by George Galloway and others. And yeah, people appreciate that we are visible and in the streets. So here we go.
We are promoting peace, no war with Ukraine. And you can see the skyline of downtown LA and the famous Echo Park fountain there.
Out here in Boston today, we're here because last night the world breathed a sigh of relief. Our leaders have been hurtling towards the edge of the nuclear cliff, moving the world closer and closer to nuclear war. And although Trump has done many things that are absolutely horrible, last night he did something that was great.
Out here to support the peace summit between President Trump and President Putin, and to thank Tulsi Gabbard for making it possible.
That we are in extreme historic times right now. President Trump is currently in the great state of Alaska, attempting to make peace between the United States and Russia.
If what's happening today in Alaska will get us closer to peace, that's what we want. That's what we want.
Yesterday's meeting between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin was a major step in the right direction. We need more dialogue, more engagement to come to the end of this war.
Hey, we're here in Portland, Oregon. CPI is on the streets of Portland, Oregon. We want to say that we support the peace deal being made between Trump and Putin in Alaska.
Something amazing happened yesterday. I don't care how you feel about Trump, but this act of peace, and the fact that our president had the patience to go over there in Alaska. Putin came to our country just yesterday and they made a lot of progress. And so we were out here because we want to put more support for this kind of effort. I have 3 children, and I want my children to grow up in a world of peace.
By declassifying the proof that Russiagate was a lie, there wasn't a plot against Trump, there was a plot against peace. It was a plot by James Clapper and John Brennan and Hillary Clinton to prevent an alliance between Russia and the United States. And now Tulsi Gabbard has blown the Russiagate lie wide open and given the President of the United States the freedom to make peace again. This is part of a worldwide day of action called by Caleb Lofton and the Center for Political Innovation. Rallies like this are happening all over the United States and even on other continents.
We support peace talks and Ukraine war. 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 Now you'll notice that we have signs here for Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard is the Director of National Intelligence, and she is the one who is really responsible for the fact that there are peace negotiations taking place. She revealed that Russiagate was a complete hoax and that there was no Russian interference in the 2016 elections. And with her revelations, she made it possible for President Trump and President Putin to sit down. We really appreciate what Tulsi Gabbard has done. Thank you, Tulsi. Thank you, Tulsi Gabbard. Thank you, Tulsi. Thank you, Tulsi.
Thank you, Tulsi.
Thank you, Tulsi. Thank you, Tulsi.
Russiagate was a big attack on peace, a big attack on the American people. And now that that's out of the way, thanks to Tulsi Gabbard, thanks to the journalism of Aaron Monte and others. Trump, you have the green light to make peace in Alaska with Russia. So let's get the job done, because we have a lot of work to do. We have a new nuclear treaty to negotiate. The START treaty is running out.
And the opening that was created for that was made by somebody by the name of Tulsi Gabbard. We'd like to thank Tulsi Gabbard for allowing that to happen, because she revealed that Russiagate was an absolute hoax, that it was a complete lie. The fact of the matter is, Russia did not interfere with our elections. In fact, they withheld plenty of information that they had on the Clinton administration, on the Clintons, etc., because they thought that she would actually win the election. It was a complete hoax.
The work she's been doing and continues to do, exposing Obama, Clinton, and others, has made repairing relations with Russia possible. She has shown Russiagate to be a hoax. She has shown they knew what they were doing. Obama rejected intelligence reports saying Russia was not interfering in our elections.
Tulsi G has set us free to stop the march towards World War III. Tulsi G has set us free to stop the march towards World War III. Thank you, Tulsi. You have freed President Trump and given him the courage and the ability to finally have the meeting with President Putin that he should have had 8 years ago.
Have a moment of reflection that I call a prayer. Pray for peace. And as my faith is Christian faith, so I would like to do the prayer in my faith tradition.
This is our city, our beloved New York, and we say finally it's time for peace in America. Our hard-earned tax dollars should no longer be going to a foreign Eastern European country that has chosen the path of destruction in needless war.
We support peace talks with Russia. No more Ukrainian and Russian death. We support peace talks in Alaska. We need to end the war with Ukraine and stop all the killing and stop funding the wars now. We support the peace talks with Putin today, now.
Had it not been for horrible leadership that egged on this war, never needed to happen. It needs to end now rather than later.
Talking peace talk with Putin is big victory for us. Russia isn't the enemy. And we are celebrating constructing the right thing by talking with Putin. This is the right path to peace. Putin is not the enemy. NATO is the enemy. NATO is the enemy here. Trump is not the enemy. It's NATO and the globalists and the imperialists. It's the people who want to start sending our children to a war that's not ours.
We just want to stop the lies and the killing and the funding for the...
Yeah, how about not taking money from more profiteers, companies like Raytheon, Adam Schiff?
Yeah, exactly.
Freaking liar. I don't want to hear it. Adam Schiff is the #1 guy responsible for, besides Hillary Clinton, promoting war with Russia. He's not our friend.
A peace deal to make, so let's get it done. Trump, you have the support of regular Americans. Regular Americans want this war to end. We want the killing to stop. So you have the green light. Make a peace deal.
Russia did not start this war. It was in 2014 when Victoria Nuland and other nefarious actors in the Obama administration overthrew the Ukrainian government and installed a fanatically anti-Russian government that bombed and destroyed the people of the eastern regions in Donetsk and Luhansk. It bombed them for 8 years. And there's a monument in Donetsk to all the children that have been killed by the Ukrainian nationalists, and it was Russia that put a stop to that. And we are so glad that instead of pursuing death and destruction, we can finally open the door to peace.
Sleepwalking Americans into war. Sweet lies about how war will solve all our problems while we degrade our own economy. We get poorer and indebted with expensive housing, cheap, crappy infrastructure that's breaking. What the hell kind of economy is this? What are we living for? I'm sick of my tax dollars going to endless wars. Alright? The whole country is sick of it. pissed off. I'm showing some emotion because I'm speaking for a silent majority that I never see on the news for some reason.
Countries are trading with each other and doing business. They're not going to go to war with each other. And that's why that Bering Sea tunnel that Donald Trump is talking about with President Putin, that could be the road to a whole new world. It's pivoting the United States away from the NATO countries and closer to the explosion of growth that is happening in Eurasia right now, in the Russian Far East. Every year in Russia, they have the Vladivostok Economic Forum. So many people in Siberia are being lifted out of poverty, and America can be part of that. American companies can make money from it.
Whether you like it or not, Russia is our neighbor. Alaska pretty much is only like 50 miles away from Russia. And something I learned after living in Harlem for a year and a half, and people do get shot out there. If you don't want to get shot, then you don't piss off your neighbor. And Russia is our neighbor.
From our tax dollars, mind you, this is our tax dollars. Our tax dollars is not coming in this country. Foreign wars, that's not ours. You think that's right? That ain't right. That's why we got a homeless epidemic, opioid crisis, everything going on here because of NATO and the military complex. So this is a step towards peace and eliminating the World War III.
Yeah. Yes, folks. That is our organization. And we had a presence all across the country. I'm still waiting to put together the video from 2 more cities where we had actions. And we're going to keep going. And we're showing support for it. Now, quickly, I don't know if you saw it today, but Zelensky visited the White House, had a meeting with President Trump, and then there were multilaterals where various European countries also met with President Trump and Zelensky. In the last few hours, Zelensky has come out and said that they asked him about swapping territory. He said, I can't talk about that with you all. I have to talk about that directly with Russian President Putin. During the meeting, President Trump paused the meeting to call Putin to arrange for the meeting between himself, Zelensky, and Russian President Putin. It looks like we are very close to ending the war. It looks like it could actually happen. Marco Rubio gave interviews, and he basically said, "Look, we're made a huge amount of admissions about how there was no talk for the past 3 years, about how talks were frozen, etc." In addition to that, Zelensky canceled his interview with Fox News. He was going to do a Fox News interview, and he just canceled it. It's all looking very good. We don't know what the deal is yet. We just hope that we can reach a situation where at this point we can see an end to the war. And we're just waiting. We're just waiting for what happens next. And as you know, our organization, the Center for Political Innovation, we are on the side of peace. We understand that the only future America has is joining the new economy that's rising in the world. We need a government of action that'll fight for working families. And so we're going to keep intervening as loudly as we possibly can on the side of peace. And I'm proud to be part of this organization. I'm proud of all the work that our organization does. Look, it shows you that even a small group of people like us with limited resources, we can make alliances, we can be in the streets and be visible, we can get stuff done. So I'm really glad that we did what we did over the weekend. The next step is we're taking our book on the Houthis to the pro-Palestine conference. There's a big Palestine conference in Detroit a couple weeks next weekend, not this coming weekend, but the next one. And it looks like we're headed there to distribute this book in bulk. Because there's many Arab Americans who really would like the message of our book about the Houthis and all of that. So we're going to be doing that. So before we get to questions and all of that, I noticed a tweet that went out from my friend Angela McCurdle, who's the head of the Libertarian Party. I guess she was the chair of the National Committee of the Libertarian Party. She's recently moved on from that role, but she tweeted about something called accelerationism. Now, I know what accelerationism is to some degree. or at least I responded and I said, are you talking about this form of Marxism, this deviant interpretation of Marxism? She said, no, there's kind of a libertarian version of it. So I looked this up. And apparently the term accelerationism is used in a number of different political movements. And so I'm going to talk about what accelerationism is in the Marxist vocabulary, why it's wrong, but then I'm going to use that to talk about a bigger thing, because I feel like it points to a bigger trend, right? So my understanding of what accelerationism is that there are some people who say, you know what, I want everything to go to hell. I want conditions to get worse because that will lead to a revolution. We've all heard that before. That's kind of a standard saying, is like, well, I don't want to make things better. I want things to get worse and worse and worse so we can finally have the revolution. And there's a problem with that. The first problem with it is, when things get worse and worse and worse, if you've been helping them to get worse or calling for them to get worse or doing nothing as things get worse, why should the people follow you and have you lead them to revolution when things get so bad they can't stand it anymore? Think about it, right? If the idea is that the people will turn to revolution because conditions are so bad, if you have been actively trying to make things worse, you're the last person that they're going to follow. I'm trying to think of an analogy, but imagine that, you wanted your landlord to hire an exterminator to get rid of cockroaches, right? You lived in an apartment building that was infected with cockroaches, right? And you wanted the landlord to do something about it, right? So, you decided you were going to make the cockroaches as bad as possible. You were going to bring in more and more cockroaches. You were just going to fill your apartment up with cockroaches. So it'd be so bad that your landlord would just have to hire the exterminator because it would just be so bad. Now, if that happened, and when you filled up the apartment building with cockroaches, first of all, are you going to be popular with your neighbors? No. Are you going to be popular with anybody at that point? No. And then, if you've been filling up the apartment with cockroaches, are they going to hire you to be the exterminator? Of course not, because you've been filling the apartment up with cockroaches. You're the guy who made things worse, right? And that this is a common problem is that revolutions are not made by bad conditions, right? That is a really common misconception, right? The understanding is very simplistic. It's that, the conditions are going to get so bad, then people are going to revolt. No, it takes a revolutionary organization to make a revolution, not simply bad conditions, right? And if there's a revolutionary organization that has enough strength and a certain balance of forces and a certain situation gets to the point that they can give voice to very widespread sentiments, they can lead it. But if you don't have a revolutionary organization, if you don't have any revolutionary organization and the crisis comes, it just leads to everyone being demoralized. It just leads for people being upset. And the way you build a revolutionary organization is having that organization advocate on behalf of the people and show that it is capable of winning change, so that when things get to the point that a lot of people are very desperate for change, they turn to people who can do it. I've often said that revolutionaries are a lot like dentists, right? Revolutionaries are a lot like dentists, and that, that most of us have nothing to do with dentistry. Most of us, we don't really care, but there's a small minority of people that go to dentistry school, that become experts on teeth. Most of us want nothing to do with them, but then we get a cavity. It hurts so bad, we go and find a dentist. Now, in that situation, you want to go see somebody who has credentials as a dentist, has been to dentistry school, knows what they are doing. And if this guy had done the opposite, and if this guy was going around giving people cavities and was going around, handing out candy because he wanted people's teeth to rot, would you go to him then? Of course not. When you go to the dentist, you want to go to somebody who can fix things. And the revolutionary organization has to be constantly fixing things, engaging in struggles, building networks, building an apparatus, so that when it gets to the point the masses are largely ready to come under their leadership, they have such an organization to lead them with, and they know what they're doing, right? And so this idea that we're just going to make things worse, no one's going to come to you if you've been on the wrong side. If the masses are mad about their conditions getting worse and you're part of the problem, why would they follow you? Number one. Number two, if you're making conditions worse, you're not building an apparatus with which to lead the masses. You're just wrecking. You're just tearing things down. And conditions in and of themselves don't make revolutions. So that's the primary problem with the accelerationist worldview. It's very simplistic. It thinks revolutions are just spontaneous revolts against things being bad, and neither of those things are true. Revolutions are not spontaneous revolts. Spontaneous revolts happen all the time. Revolutions are made by revolutionary organizations that are capable of taking power in a crisis. And revolutions are also not simply the result of conditions being bad, right? They're a result of a certain balance of forces. And without a revolutionary organization, you're incapable of having a revolution. So the accelerationist worldview of we're going to help make things worse in order to lead to revolution is wrong. It's wrong. And it will lead to isolating the masses from the revolutionary organization. It'll lead to the revolutionary organization being on the wrong side and becoming the enemy of the working people. It'll lead to not creating the apparatus necessary. It is an incorrect worldview. And there are many versions of it, too. During Marx's time, there was a guy who put forward this notion of the iron law of wages. And he said that you shouldn't form unions to go on strike and demand higher wages because the prices will just naturally go up. And he called it the iron law of wages. And that, if you organize a labor union to demand higher pay, the prices will just naturally go up. And as a result, it won't change anything. So we really should just tell people the only answer is to have a revolution. And Marx said, actually, that's not true. First of all, because prices are not set simply by wages. Wages are a factor. However, prices are set by the market. It's set by demand, right? It's set by what people are willing to pay. It's not the only factor. And that, the profit margin can go down in a situation where the employer has to pay more, but he's competing with other people. That's simply not the only factor. And that, how are you going to build a revolutionary organization on the basis of just telling people they need a revolution and not fighting to advance their conditions? I remember having this argument during Occupy Wall Street. There was a really common feeling among the occupiers. It was very widespread. We must not have demands, right? We must not have demands. The political group I was part of made the mistake of trying to think we could influence or change Occupy Wall Street. We were not in that position, right? We should have just viewed Occupy Wall Street as a recruiting opportunity because Occupy Wall Street was very much controlled by forces from above. And those forces that controlled Occupy Wall Street from above, one of their things was to make sure it had no demands. Well, we were trying to get Occupy Wall Street to have demands, which, was kind of a waste of time. But I would argue about, one of our things, we wanted Occupy Wall Street to call for full employment, to call for a jobs guarantee, full employment. And I would say, well, we should demand full employment. And their response is, no, we can't have any demands because all the government has to do to end our movement is fulfill the demands. That was what they said, and if we demand, full employment, all the government has to do is give everyone a job. And then we can't have a revolution. Then it's all over. And I heard that. And that's like one of the silliest arguments I've ever heard. First of all, because do you think the government is just going to give every person a job? Oh, well, we don't want to protest. All right, let's guarantee everyone employment. No, right? It's very difficult to win things like Social Security, to win things like, universal education. It's been very, very difficult to win the basic things that working people have fought for, number one. Number two, if we were able to build a revolutionary movement that was big enough to demand that the government employ and give everyone a job, and it actually did it, that would inspire even more activism because people would see, they would learn through the course of struggle, oh, wow, we can actually get the government to do things. And it would be very emboldening, right? And the amount of influence we would have, the amount of mass movements we would have at that point would be massive. And winning a great victory, if we could force the state to provide employment to every person, create an economic Bill of Rights, that would be such an empowering thing. That wouldn't lead to a revolution being called off. That would massively inflate a revolutionary movement. So they were just wrong about this. But this kind of thinking is everywhere. But it's interesting. This is, accelerationism generally is this idea, well, I want to make everything worse, right? And it puts you on the wrong side of the barricade, right? Working people want their incomes to go up. They want, better jobs and economic opportunity. And you advocate against your own class and against your own people because you hope that they will get hurt enough, that they will become revolutionary. And that is, you, at that point, they perceive you as the aggressor. At that point, you're working against the interests of the people you're supposedly fighting for. It just doesn't, you can't do that. You can't do that, right? Again, it may take getting a cavity to go see a dentist, but when you finally get that cavity, you are not going to follow a guy who has been going around wrecking people's teeth. You're going to go around following somebody who's demonstrated he can fix a cavity. So, but anyway, but this leads to the bigger point, right? Because, my friend Angela, she's not a Marxist by any means. She's very anti-communist. She's a libertarian. Apparently, there is a trend of libertarians who are similar to the Marxist accelerationists. And they want to make everything worse and make, the conditions and the crisis so bad that you have a libertarian revolution. And this reminded me, and then when I went to ChatGPT and I said, ChatGPT, what is accelerationism? And ChatGPT came out and told me it's a form of white supremacism, right? That tells you how woke ChatGPT really is, right? ChatGPT is obnoxiously woke. And I'll tell you more about that another time. But ChatGPT said accelerationism is a form of white nationalism, and it referenced a book called Siege. And I had heard about the book Siege, which is a white supremacist manifesto that was published. And it's all very interesting. And it's fascinating to me. We live in a strange time, a very strange time. But in every political deviant space, there seems to be a school of thought that develops that says there's no hope and advocates hating your neighbor. Right? And this deviation seems to develop among libertarians, among communists, among conservatives. And it's interesting. For years in the Marxist spaces, the primary expression of it's hopeless and a kind of pessimistic view was a book called Settlers. And it was widely circulated online. It became very popular. Settlers, the mythology of the white proletariat. And it was this book that said white people are not working class. White people, because the USA was founded as a settler country, because of their white privilege, they benefit from imperialism, and they'll never have a revolution because they benefit too much from imperialism. So there's no point in organizing in the first world. The first world countries are just going to have to eventually be conquered and invaded by the third world. And it made that argument. And this is, they call themselves third worldists, Maoist third worldists. It was a big trend online. And almost immediately, if one got into communism online, you would immediately end up in coming across the book Settlers that says, oh no, there's no point. People in America are just too bought off. They're too comfortable. And so you just have to, be pessimistic and hopeless and all of that. And it was interesting. And I mean, I came across that book and I studied it, and I to some degree or other fell for its arguments at one point. I never really fully got consumed by it, but it was a concern that I had. I certainly gave those arguments a fair amount of attention. That stuff is widely circulated among online Marxists, and it's a justification for not building an organization, not doing any activism, because it's all just hopeless. And also it's a justification for being an internet woke loser, right? Because the hatred is no longer toward the ruling class, it's toward white people, right? The white working class, essentially, calling them racist and all of that. And it actually puts you on the side of the ruling class largely, because the ruling class is trying to drop the living standard of workers. It's trying to manipulate low-income white workers against the black community, and it gets you involved in this push and pull. The book Settlers, it's very interesting because I have long suspected that there was some kind of government operation to get that book widely circulated. Why? I noticed some weird stuff. When I was in Ohio doing activism among prisoners, right, there was this communist group that no longer exists. That was this mysterious communist group that if you were an activist, prisoner, if you were a prisoner who was getting communist publications or getting material related to black nationalism or activism, inevitably you would just start getting this newspaper sent to you in prison called Mem Notes for the Maoist Internationalist Movement. And this newspaper looked crazy, right? And it was a kooky newspaper that would show up, and it had so many politically correct spellings. It would spell the word America with America KKK. Instead of United States of America, it was United Snakes of America KKK. It would spell the word woman as WOMMIN, or WOMYN, and human was HUMIN, human, and it was like every word was spelled differently, was spelled awkwardly. And on top of that, it would have the pictures in the newspaper would be pictures of famous people, government officials, political figures from around the world, and someone had taken a black magic marker and scrawled like devil horns on them or like vampire fangs on them. It was weird. It was very, very weird. I found out that second thing comes from the Cultural Revolution. Apparently, during the Cultural Revolution in China, these were Maoists. During the Cultural Revolution in China, there was a tradition of, when they were targeting somebody, they'd have a big picture of them and they would, with black ink, like scrawl vampire fangs or devil horns on them, or, cross out their face or something like that, put an X over their face or something. So there was kind of a cultural tradition for that first one. It wasn't just someone being crazy. The politically correct spellings were also crazy, but it put forward this line that there are that all white people in America are oppressors. All white people in America are the beneficiaries of imperialism and are the enemies. Therefore, you can't build a revolutionary movement in America because all the white people are just evil. It put forward that line, and they circulated the book Settlers. And the book Settlers, at that point wasn't in print. And they would send to prisoners in the mail spiral-bound photocopies of this book. It was very weird. But if you were a prisoner, especially a black activist prisoner, and I was working with the Lucasville Defense Committee in Cleveland, black activist prisoners would inevitably get Mem Notes sent to them, and they would get this spiral-bound book Settlers sent to them. It was very kooky. A couple years later, an anarchist press called the AK Press published the book. And the author of the book is a very mysterious, the individual who wrote the book is someone who's identified by the name J. Sakai, right? And no one knows who J. Sakai is. J. Sakai apparently was an Asian American. It was part of the new communist movement in the 1980s, and it wasn't successful, and that inspired him to write this book, Settlers. The book lies, actually. The book misquotes William Z. Foster and distorts William Z. Foster's words to make him look racist. And the book, it is deceptively written, designed to make you think that that William Z. Foster, the leader of the Communist Party, was a racist. He talks about the strike in 1919, the steel strike, and how black workers were used as scab labor to break apart the strike. And he makes the point that that's why unions should be anti-racist, right? And because the unions were racist and the black community was not included, the black community had no reason to support the strike. And he's making the point that they should oppose racism. But they take a quote out of context to make it look like William Z. Foster was blaming black people for being scabs and was racist. It's really, really, slimy and to be that deceptively written. And it's very mysterious, and no one knows who this J. Sakai who wrote it is. The group that was circulating the book was called Maoist Internationalist Movement, Mem Notes. And They were this group that, no one could ever get in touch with them. They were very mysterious. Their newspapers would just show up and be left places. No one could ever see them. It wasn't a group that you could ever meet somebody from. But their stuff was all through prisons. And then the founder of the group was a professor in Ann Arbor, Michigan, named Henry Park, who was of Korean descent. And he was like a math professor. And I guess he'd gone to Harvard University. And while he was at Harvard, he'd started a club called Radical Academics, Radicads. And then when he moved to Ann Arbor to be a math professor, he changed the name of his group to Maoist Internationalist Movement. And he ran the group secretly. It was like his secret hobby is that he was part of this secret Maoist group that put out newspapers and sent newspapers around the country to prisoners or whatever, and said that white people were inherently reactionary. And then he, appears to have had a psychotic break, and he announced that the group was liquidating, and he started a blog, a blog that was, he just announced, my name's Henry Park. I'm the guy who actually runs MIM. And, I'm dissolving the group, and, because it has no point, and because I've been, it was weird. He just announced to the world that he was the guy who started the group. And then he started the articles that he wrote on his blog after he, doxed himself, revealed who he was. The articles he started writing were schizophrenic. He started saying that, like, he would interpret the headlines of New York Times articles to be personal messages delivered to him. They call that delusions of self-reference. It's a common thing in schizophrenia, where you think that, you turn on the TV and the news reporter is saying something and you think he's talking to you, right? It's called delusions of self-reference. It's the guy was having a schizophrenic episode. And he died a couple years later. The cause of death is not listed. It's very possible it was suicide, which is very sad. There are obituaries for him. It's kind of a sad situation, but it appears this mysterious group that was very secretive, that was run by the math professor Henry Park out of Harvard University, out of Harvard, and then Ann Arbor, Michigan, University of Michigan. It appears that was the main group promoting this book, Settlers, that said there was no point. And now the book is just widely promoted among internet communists. And it is the reason to be pessimistic. Now, you all will remember that one of the people that bought into this third worldism, this idea that, there's no point in building a revolutionary movement in the first world. One of the people was a guy named Jason Unruhe, Maoist Rebel News, who I used to go on his channel. He used to be friendly to us. But it was weird. As we were building our organization, he started to just get negative. And he would have me on his channel. But then, he would do videos where he just was like, he was clearly ranting at me. And the rant was, there's no hope. Why is Caleb always trying to, build up hope and build a movement? There is no hope. And then he had a debate with me about the question of wealth. And, and he was saying that, how can you want to increase the living standard for people? He's giving the same limited resources Malthusian thing. And I showed him, you can listen to the debate, it's here on this channel still. I showed him that no. The only way you can have the higher stage of communism is with vast abundance. And so then he agreed with me that I was right. And then he just transitioned to, yeah, but there still has to be a limit. There just can't be hope. And it really got down to his anger at me was just, I was hopeful. I wanted to build a movement. I thought there was a point in building a mass movement. And, and he didn't. And he was very threatened by the idea that there was any hope in building a movement. And when I argued with him, I realized I wasn't arguing with him. I was arguing with a demon. I was arguing with he had been infected by depression. And the depression was a place to hide, right? It was, the idea of actually organizing and going out and doing anything instead of just sitting on the internet and getting mad was threatening to him. And he needed to hide in that depression to be safe, right? That pessimism is a place to hide because there's no responsibility. There's no risk, right? If you want to apply for a good paying job, right? If you don't like the job you have and there's a job that pays much better that you would like, right? Applying for it can be very nerve wracking. and you can get quite upset if you don't get it. And a place to hide is to say, well, I'll never get that job anyway. There's no point. And a lot of people do this. This is a really common thing that people do in life, right? If they fear failure, they will just tell themselves, no, it's pointless. There's no point anyway, to avoid the emotional investment and the risk of failure, right? And that's a really common thing people do in many aspects of life. And what Maoist third worldism is for a lot of people is, is that they don't want the responsibility of going out and building a mass movement. So they just say, oh, there's no point. There's no point in building a mass movement. There's no point. And it's a way to let themselves off the hook, right? And if you challenge that, they will get very, very angry. Why are people so determined to make sure there's no hope? Because they're afraid to get active. They're afraid to intervene politically. That's what they're afraid of, right? That if you intervene, if you're right and there is hope, then they have to get involved, and they're scared of the consequences. They're scared of the risk of failure. They don't have the confidence to do it. And so it's just like the person who, the job interview, they could go and interview for the job that's got better pay. But they don't do it because, I just won't get it anyway. There's no point, they're scared of failure. So they'd rather just declare game over before they start, and then they don't have to worry about it. Right. Well, what's interesting is that this manifestation happens in other circles as well. Now, among white supremacists, right, there's this book called Siege. All right. And this is apparently some kind of manifesto written by some white supremacist that says there's no point in building a racist movement. So we basically just have to try to provoke as much resentment and racial unrest. And that a lot of the mass murdering terrorists in the white nationalist movement tend to be people who've read this book, Siege, that instead of getting involved in white supremacist politics, instead of doing whatever white nationalists do, they go out and become mass shooters and get killed themselves, believing that by committing their mass shooting, they're creating more racial resentment, and they're causing the problems that they're upset about to intensify, and that will eventually lead to society collapsing or having a race war or something, right? It's very interesting. And apparently there's a whole trend of white supremacists, and it's weird. I mean, obviously I'm not an advocate of white supremacy. But there are some white supremacists that are trying to build a white supremacist movement. And there are some, the ones who go out and commit mass shootings and become mass murderers and terrorists, tend to be the kind who embrace, what sounds like some kind of weird accelerationism within white supremacism. And I think that's interesting as well. Now, obviously, people that advocate Maoist third worldism, they don't become left adventurous terrorists. But what is interesting is that, the Weathermen had the view, the Weather Underground, the terrorists of the Weather Underground, they did have the view that all white people are inherently reactionary. All white people are inherently reactionary, and they were the good white people that would, engage in adventurous terrorism to support the black people. So apparently that view is associated with terrorism on the left as well. That's interesting to me. Now, the libertarian accelerationist crowd, the libertarian accelerationist crowd, I don't think any of them are committing terrorism. I don't know, but when people get into that worldview, the essence of what so-called accelerationism is in all of these spheres is declaring that your neighbor is the enemy. That's basically what you're declaring, right? That our view is not that our neighbor is the enemy. Our view is that the enemy is the system. But if you get into the accelerationist point of view, where you're trying to make conditions worse in society so people will revolt, you're going to advocate against your neighbors, right? And so you might not be saying actively, my neighbors are my enemy. But if you're trying to drive your neighbor's living conditions down, I mean, if someone's trying to drive your living conditions down, they're your enemy. If someone's trying to make your life worse, they become your enemy. So even though they may not say that, and then those who adopt this, settlers mindset that all white people are inherently reactionary, benefit from imperialism, they are actively saying my neighbors are my enemy. And that this kind of viewpoint that says, well, I'm going to advocate for things in my society to get worse, right? Whether it comes from the right or from the libertarians or from the so-called left, it always manifests itself in making yourself the enemy of your neighbors. And then you can see why then that would lead one to commit an act of terrorism, right? If your enemies are your neighbors, why not kill them? And it leads the person to a kind of isolation where, their politics is a manifestation of their isolation, right? I can't get along with my neighbor. I'm trying to make the conditions of my neighbors worse, whether that's to inspire them to revolt, whether that's because you believe they're the beneficiaries of imperialism, whether because, for whatever reason, right? Accelerationist politics. The idea seems to be that, right, that you are making your neighbors, you're making the people you're around your enemy. And so it's a way of isolating yourself in your politics. And then, of course, it's not surprising that then once you've isolated, once you've declared the people around you to be your enemy, or you've made enemies out of the people in your life, it's not then surprising that some of the people, not all, but a very small minority of the people who adopt these views from whatever political movement become terrorists, become murderers. And that many people in the chat already saw where I was going with this. This is political inceldom. Right. And this is very interesting, but it's like, the incels, we talk about the incels, ContraPoints made her documentary about the incels, which I thought was actually pretty well made. It was a pretty good investigation. She did way more research than I was ever going to do on them. ContraPoints is, funded by, is working with Hillary Clinton and is, one of the State Department bred to people. And she's awful in many, many ways. The incel documentary was decent. But the reason that people talk about the incels is because they're one of the most easy communities to mock, right? They call themselves involuntary celibates, young men who would like to have sex and cannot have sex. And so they have formed an internet community around the fact that they cannot have sex, and they blame women for this. And they've developed a whole worldview about the fact that they cannot have sex, right? And you look at it and you think, what the hell is this? But then, if you're a man, that's a phase that all young men go through. All young men go through a phase where they feel like women don't like them, whatever. That's normal. And to some degree or other, people who that becomes their identity have always been around. There's a musical or there's a novel and then a movie, and there's a whole work of art starting from the 1800s. It's been redone many, many times. It's called The Phantom of the Opera. And he's an incel, right? I mean, the guy is, he's born deformed, and, he can't get a girl, so he hides in the opera house and blows people up and kills people, whatever, right? And if you watch the musicals, I don't know why it's always musicals, but Oklahoma, right? You watch the musical Oklahoma, there's a guy, Judd Fry, who's the villain. And Judd Fry, they cut it out of the movie, but, in the actual musical Oklahoma, he has a whole song about how he needs a woman desperately, and he's mad that he can't have a woman, and that's why he ends up, trying to kill Curly, the main character. And to some degree or other, there have always been men that have resentment toward women because they feel that they're unattractive or whatever. So it's not like this is some unheard of thing. What it used to be was a phase that young guys would go through, and then they would move on. But then the internet created a way that they could then find a bunch of other men who feel that way and become connected to them in an internet space where they could then feed on this worldview, right? So if they have this worldview, they're obviously looking for evidence to back up their worldview. Now they're looking for evidence to back up the worldview together, right? And they're feeding each other, right? And they already feel this way. They feel frustrated, sexually hopeless. They have low self-esteem or whatever. But then, right, now there's other people who can help them feel this way. And apparently one thing these young incel guys used to do is post pictures of themselves, and the other incels would tear them down for their appearance, right, to reinforce that they shouldn't be pursuing romantic relationships. They should just give up. It was hopeless. Can you imagine this? Like, why would somebody subject themselves to that, right? But they would post pictures, guys, do you think there's any chance I could get a girlfriend? And they would all team up. No, you're ugly in this way. You're ugly in that way. Very weird behavior. But it was about, it was like reinforcing this worldview that keeps them in isolation. Also, it's an online community. They don't make real friends through being incels, right? They just are on the internet being incels, right? So it's not real friends and real connections. And, it's a really unhealthy spiral. And then, of course, there have been a few shootings that have happened, murders of women that were linked to these communities. Not surprising, because, again, if you make, enemies out of society, if you develop a worldview that says society is out to get you, society is completely unfair to you, there's no hope of you ever, it leads to being pessimistic and eventually murderous, right? You're ultimately making enemies out of your neighbors, not just women, but society in general, right? Society is rigged against men like you. There is no hope, it's an interesting form, and that accelerationism of the Maoist third worldist variety, of the left accelerationist variety, or even within these other spaces like the right wing, like white supremacism, or within libertarianism, it is a manifestation of this kind of thinking, right? It is political inceldom. It's very interesting to think about. It's very, very interesting. It really is. And it's a phenomenon that is unique to the technology that we have in our time, right? It's very, very unique to our technological era, and it's something to pay attention to, right? Like I told you that in Marx's day, there was the guy who talked about the iron law of wages. There was a guy named Daniel de Leon who called himself an impossibilist. There's always been, people would say, well, there's no point. We just have to call for a revolution. But making that a way to isolate yourself and become part of kind of an isolated online community that just reinforces your negativity and pessimism. What I saw from Jason Unruh, and the way he was not disagreeing with me politically. He was disagreeing with me spiritually. I believed there was hope, and he was triggered by the fact that there was hope. He didn't want there to be hope. He didn't want to actively get involved in the political process. He didn't actively want to build a community of activists and organizers. There was no hope, and he was just going to, no, Caleb, stop saying there's hope. And it was visible anger at me because of the implications of what I was saying. I was potentially saying, we can build a movement. We can build a community. We can organize. I was looking for openings through which we could build a movement. No. We just have to be isolated and hopeless on the internet, right? I mean, and if you want to talk spiritually, that is Satan, right? That is a manifestation of Satan. It's pessimistic. It's anti-human. It's Malthusianism. But it's something that we have to deal with, right? We have to deal with. And so much of what I've been writing about, innovationism, about living biologically, right? Is dealing with this question. The Khrushchevism book, the final section is about how to actively fight against this. And our whole concept of living biologically, you have to see this mindset, this pessimism it's like a giant hand reaching out and grabbing you and pulling you into living biologically. Becoming politically involved, joining a movement is awakening. Right, is taking control of your life, actively making decisions. It is, understanding the world around you. You're not living only in the biological sense. You're actively human at that point. You're engaging with big ideas. You're intervening in history. And what the ruling elite want us to do is to live only biologically. They view man as just another animal. They argue that we're not capable of changing the world. We're capable of doing. They view us as overpopulated animals. They want to cull the herd and drive down the population, etc. Right? And this kind of atomizing, isolating politics is a way of taking somebody who is potentially politically active, and it's like a giant hand that can grab them and just pull them back into a biological existence, right? That's really what you have to understand it to be, and you have to view it as such and actively fight against it as such, right? You have to understand that there is there is some demonic evil force out there. If you want to understand it spiritually, you want to understand it however you want, that is actively trying to reach you and grab you and pull you out of human existence, right? That is what is happening, and that it's a daily battle, and that the reason I come on here every night is that, I'm on here trying to give a hopeful, optimistic message to all of you, and trying to stay connected with all of you, and trying to maintain our movement. I'm not building an internet fandom, right? If I was trying to be popular, I'd be talking about a lot of different stuff. And the reason that I've been targeted and the reason this channel is heavily suppressed and all of that is because I'm building a genuine movement, a movement that stands in solidarity with the countries around the world that are fighting imperialism, a movement that does stuff in real life and is a real community of people that are there for each other and holding each other up. And that is just what you're not supposed to do in these times, right? You're not supposed to do that. The accelerationist worldview is a way to keep people from being involved, right? And it is a way to ultimately put people who genuinely are outraged about the suffering that their neighbors are subjected to, who generally are outraged about the way our society is going, and generally have the best interests of society at heart. It's a way to manipulate them into being the enemy, and to being the enemy of their neighbors, and to advocating for the very things they oppose. And that's really what accelerationism gets you doing is, you become somebody who wants to change the world because you realize all these wars are wrong. But then the accelerationist worldview says, well, we need these wars so that imperialism breaks down. And so eventually you start advocating for the very wars that you opposed, right? You become involved in this because you see that working people are suffering, living conditions are getting worse, wages are going down. But then you get into this accelerationist worldview, and then it says, oh, I want the wages to go down. Suddenly you're advocating the very things that you opposed, right? And that's the trap of accelerationist thinking, is it's a way of tricking you to be against what you're for, out of anger at your fellow man, right? Out of frustration and disappointment with your fellow man, you end up opposing what you stood for. Isn't that wild? Isn't that crazy? And that's why we have to oppose it. And that ultimately we have to look, it's difficult to work with people. Working with people is very, very frustrating. It is, right? And it's difficult and it's not easy, and people get you down and they let you down. But without an organization, you have nothing, right? I mean, that's, without an organization, there's nothing. And, and don't doubt it, right? If you're not actually building an organization, what is the point? There is no point then, right? And that's what I don't understand. At one point, somebody was saying I should stop organizing. I don't know how to do that. I wouldn't be doing this if there was not some organizing going on. It's all about organizing, right? I mean, it's about changing the world. This isn't intellectually stimulating, right? This isn't just some weird way to be entertained. The point is to change the world, and it requires an organization to change the world. And sometimes it's a small organization, and sometimes the organization goes through twists and turns, and the world is constantly changing. But building an actual organization gives you the ability to intervene. You can go to our website, cpiusa.org, and hit join. It's that easy, right? It's $15 a month. Your first month is free. You can join the Center for Political Innovation on our website. But being part of an organization is a necessity. And even if it's difficult, and even if the organization goes through trials and turns, that's why I am committed to doing this. And, a lot of people are very scared to get politically active, because of the risk involved. Because what if I fail, or what if people disappoint me? And people will disappoint you. What if we invest a lot of time and resources and don't get an immediate payout? Well, sometimes you don't get an immediate payout. Sometimes you do, right? Sometimes the payout is very quick, and other times it's not. Here's a great story of a non-immediate payout during the pandemic. I wrote a book about Kamala Harris. It was my pandemic book. Basically, through my job, I met somebody who knew Kamala Harris's dad, and I found out that Kamala Harris's dad was a communist or a former communist at one point. And I thought, that's crazy. And how is it that the movement that I believe in so strongly could create someone so evil as Kamala Harris? And I researched what Kamala Harris did as a prosecutor in California and how vicious she was. And I also found out that she was estranged from her father. And I thought, there's a book here. And so I spent the pandemic doing research, and I put together a very short book about Kamala Harris. And I published it in September of 2020. And I published it, and I sold maybe 200 copies. Didn't sell that much. I did some interviews about it on Sputnik Radio. I got a review in a newspaper in India. A newspaper in India did a review of it because Kamala Harris, her mom is from India, and they watch RT in India, and they saw my face on RT, and somebody must have Googled me because they saw me in India. They saw I'd written a book, so there was like a short review of my book in a newspaper in India. There was also a review of my book in the British communist newspaper Morning Star, which totally surprised me. I don't know where that came from. And that was it. And it was like the book, okay, it existed, whatever. And it was just 3-part thing. It was not until 4 years later, I was thinking about writing a whole nother book about Kamala Harris when it looked like she might be the nominee of the Democratic Party. And they banned my book from Amazon. And when they banned it, all of a sudden, everyone got interested in the book. And InfoWars had me on to talk about it. And Jimmy Dore had me on to talk about it. And Max Blumenthal was speaking up about it. And Kim Iverson and George Galloway. And my book sold thousands and thousands of copies after they banned it from Amazon. It sold on Gumroad. It sold on Lulu. And finally, they restored it 7 days later. I sold another 3,000 on Amazon. And look, that was activism. I wrote the book. I consulted with other people about it. It was a CPI publication. And there was not a payout for 4 years. And then look what happened. And so then what did we do? We raised money, and then we printed the book in bulk, and we distributed it at the Democratic National Convention in bulk. We distributed over 1,000 copies of it. And got the message out there. And it was a great way to intervene politically. It was a great thing that we did. And the payout wasn't immediate. There are other things that we've done, friendships and relationships where, I've organized for a cause, and, it led to something down the road, and that the payout is not always immediate. The payout is not always immediate. Sometimes it takes a long time. There's conversations I've had with people. There's somebody that I've known in my life, and I had a political debate with them, and 5 years later, they've called me up and said, Caleb, you were totally right about this. And the person is involved in some kind of activism, and this isn't like, it's not like a business transaction, right? Yes, Charles is right. Sometimes you're too early on the issue. That's a really good way of putting it. And it's not, it's not a business transaction, right? It's something quite different. It is a way of planting the seeds of knowledge, right? It's that basically we're politically active because we know something. We know something that our society doesn't want out there, and we want to get a message out there, and we want to build an organization around certain ideas that are foreign to this society. And we go out and we plant the seeds, and sometimes the ideas blossom and sometimes they don't. And that's okay. And that, it is a daily struggle. And that, one thing that I always try to do, right, is to, is when people are being targeted, to stand with them. Right. And a lot of people don't understand this. Right. A lot of people don't get this. They think, well, if someone's being targeted, I want to move away from them as far as possible, because I don't want to be associated with them. No, right? When you are being targeted, as I have been targeted, not as viciously as some people have been targeted. I mean, the people who stood with me when I was being targeted became very important to me and remained so. And I will never forget that. who stood with me and who didn't, right? And that's really, really important. And I think about some of the work that CPI has done, some of the relationships we have is because when people were under attack, we supported them and we defended them. When they were under attack, when the Huru movement got raided, we supported them. And we ended up raising their case with the Russian president, raising their case at the United Nations, because we stood with them. And that's important. And that relationship that we have with Uhuru, as different as our politics are, is a very important relationship that has led to our organization doing really important activism internationally and domestically. Right. And again, it's because we saw that someone was under attack and we decided it was our obligation to stand with them. And, and again, we planted the seeds and look what it blossomed into. Right. And now we have a very close relationship with them and we've done important work around their case. And, and that doing political activism and being in a community of people is a very rewarding thing. But it's not for everybody. And one mistake that I am guilty of is I expect everyone to be me. Well, or I give the impression to people that they're not me, right? That you need to be me. And that's a mistake that I make. On top of that, a mistake that I think all of us make is that we view this as a competition, right? And it's not a competition, right? And I got to tell you, there's a group of people now, and it's like they really, who were with me at one of these international gatherings I was at. Every time I went down to coffee with them, I would sit down to coffee with them and we're just talking about, we're at this international gathering. Oh, did you know that we're on the 3rd committee of the 12th and we just signed up with the, it's like, I don't care. Right. And it's like everything out of their mouths was, oh, look at us. And it was just this competitive. And then every time we did something as a group, CPI is a very important group. We got invited here. They couldn't be happy for us. They were mad about it. Oh, I can't believe that they did it. Right. And it's just like, you can't, that's toxic. You can't work in an atmosphere where where people who agree with you and have the same message and viewpoint as you, every time they accomplish something for something that you yourself believe in, you view it as a failure because you didn't do it. Right? And every time you accomplish something for a cause they supposedly agree with, they view it as a failure on their part. You can't work with people like that. And people view activism as if it's a giant competition. And I've got to prove that I am the greatest activist and somebody is a better activist than me. And, I failed. And it's like, that's not how it works. That's just not how it works. It's not a competition. It's about maintaining the community that keeps us all alive and fighting for all of our lives and all of our conditions, including people that are not part of this movement. People will never meet. Think about it. We are fighting every day to prevent World War III so that children that we've never met will wake up and not be liquidated by nuclear war. We are organizing. We are trying to stop this war in Ukraine so that people who speak a different language than us on another side of the world will be able to not die. Just think about it, right? We are, there's an element of you just have to lose yourself and lose your ego in this, or you can't do it. And if this is an ego thing, if you're determined to prove I am the greatest activist, I'm this, you're going to burn out because you won't be. You won't be. There's always going to be somebody who does more than you or has more opportunity or does something better than you do or maybe doesn't do something as good as you do but still gets more attention than you, and you just won't be able to handle it. Right? You have to view this as being about the relationships and the support that you're able to give other people, about the truth that we're all learning together through the living struggle, not through the books we read. The books are important, but the books are a guide to the living struggle, right? You have to view it that way. And it's hard, right? And we all need validation, right? It's a basic human need for validation. People need validation, right? They need to be able to look at myself in the mirror and say, I have done something. I have accomplished this. I am important. And these organizations and movements are a place people get validated. No question about it. People seek validation in these movements. And if they don't get it, they get mad and leave. We all need validation, and we need to create an atmosphere where people get that validation. Right. And that's one of the big problems, You know, I mean, with communist groups in general, especially the old ones, they're led by 3 or 4 boomers, and they get all the validation. And any young person who comes along who gets any validation, it's like a threat to them somehow. And that's why those groups have no future, right? And that you have to facilitate a mechanism, whereas number one, people in the group get the validation that they deserve, right? That it's not just about validating 1 or 2 people and everyone goes along with it, but there's a way for a lot of people to get validation from the group. But number 2, people eventually get to the point that they're thoroughly invested in this, where it's not simply about their own validation. The community itself is validating. Seeing a victory for the whole group is validating. Seeing a victory for the cause in general, the cause you're advocating for, is validating. And it's not easy to get there, but you have to get people into the mindset that if this war in Ukraine stops, right, even if every video of everything that CPI did to make it happen is completely erased from history, we should all still be happy about that, right? And even if, you know, and it's not easy to get to that place, especially in an age where people's self-esteem is so actively torn down. So many people just feel like they have no value and feel like they are not important and feel isolated. And that's what all this incel isolation, you know, acceleration politics is about. People just don't feel they have any value. And people turn to this kind of politics hoping that they will get that kind of validation. And in some cases, they don't get it quick enough. In other cases, they, you know, it comes at a cost, at the risk of having to work with other people who are frustrating, or having to get your hands dirty or whatever, and they are not willing to do that. It's not worth it. And, you know, this isn't for everybody. And a new rule that I am living by is no chasing after people, right? I mean, if you get involved in this and you want to go, you know, I'm not going to be happy about it, but, you know, there's not much I can do about it. I'm not chasing after people. I have learned, unfortunately, that the people you chase after it doesn't end well. If I'm chasing after somebody, if someone says, I don't want to come to the event, and I say, please, could you come to the event? They come, but then that's a check mark against me. And then the next time that I ask them to do something and they don't want to do it, and I say, could you please, you know, that's another check mark against me. And eventually, eventually they hate me. And it all comes out. And then you made me go to this event. And then and I didn't make you do anything. I'm trying to get shit done here. I was hoping that you could come to this event or help out in this way. And you weren't able to do it. And I emphasized how important it was. And you then did it. But they hold it against you, right? If you fight to make people do things, if people feel that somehow you're compelling them to do things that they don't want to do, eventually they hate you. And it's like everything that you got them to do, that you compelled them to do, they hold it against you. It's a check mark against you, right? You know, and it's like you read the complaints that some of these idiots have against me, you know. Oh, he asked me to drive at this event. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Oh, it's just, you know, and it's like the people that I am done chasing after people, right? If you want to be involved, you'll be involved. And if you don't want to be involved, you won't be involved. You know, and I believe you will be happier if you're involved. And I believe we should honor and appreciate the people who are involved in ways that maybe in previous generations people didn't think to do. You know what I'm saying? You know, but that said, you know, it is, look, we need to build a movement. We need to build a movement. We need to build a movement. The organization is the most precious thing. And without the organization, there's no point in doing this. You know, and, you know, he made us practice 3 times. Yeah. God forbid. The organization is the most important thing. And it's a lot harder. I made you hold a sign. It's a lot harder it is a lot harder to hold an organization together in our times than it used to be, for reasons that I've just spent the last hour or so explaining. So I just wanted to, that was just kind of my reflection in hearing complaints about accelerationism from libertarians. And it made me think, and that, you know, I go into a lot of different spaces. Yesterday, you know, wild story yesterday, you know where I was yesterday? I was in upstate New York at a gathering of a religious group from India. that they had an event, and it was totally random that I got to go to it. And there were elected officials there, and a guru from India had flown into the United States, and his followers, Indian Americans here in America, saw him speak. And there was about 400 of them. It was in upstate New York, and a gathering I never would have in a million years dreamed of going to. And I learned a lot from going into that space, honestly. The messaging, I listened, it was in English and in Hindi. And the messaging and the way these people are involved in this religious community, it's a form of Sikhism, right? And it was a hugely educational experience. And it's funny because the people I went with kept saying to me, "Oh, you're not bored, are you? This is a long event." I was not bored at all. I was not bored at all. It was fascinating to me, right? It was a long event. It was like a 3.5-hour ceremony, many different speeches and songs before the guru from India ultimately gave his hour-long lecture. But I went up and went to the bathroom at one point, but I was fascinated by the whole thing. I'm not a Sikh, I'm not from India. I don't speak Hindi, but they had translation. It was fascinating to me because the whole time I'm sitting there and saying, okay, what makes this work, right? What attracts the people here? What are they getting out of this? And I'm learning, I'm absorbing the whole event like a sponge because I'm interested in organizing. And this was a very effectively organized event, right? And this is Sikhism is certainly not the religious prevailing view in America. This country is largely Christian largely, but it's even more secular these days than it is Christian. But Sikhism is a very small religious minority, but yet there's hundreds of people there, and obviously there's an ethnic component to it, right? I mean, it's a religion from India, a religious movement. It's a breakaway from Hinduism, and but I'm sitting there and I'm fascinated by the whole thing, and I'm absorbing it because I'm interested in organizations. I'm interested in organizing. Organizing is something that I am very much all about, right? And I know that an organization is important, and I know that we're going to enter a period. We're going to enter a time where organizing is going to become a necessity. Right now, organizing is not a necessity, right? It is something that some people choose to do because they need it. They need it. They need the community. They feel alienated from the society. They understand that things need to change and all of that. But we're going to enter strategic equilibrium, a crisis where organizing will not be something that people do because they want to. Organizing will be something that is a necessity because society is collapsing. I'm not an accelerationist. I'm not trying to bring on that collapse, but I'm telling you, we're going to enter a crisis. I mean, that's just the way things are going, where, people will be organizing out of necessity, not out of desire, right? It won't be fulfilling a psychological need that they have. It will be fulfilling a physical need that they have. They'll need to eat, etc. And these organizations will play a different role. We have to lay the foundations. We have to lay the foundations for when that comes, right? When strategic equilibrium enters, right? This revolutionary periods, revolutionary movements, there's strategic defensive, and then there's strategic equilibrium, and then ultimately you have the strategic offensive, right? And right now we're in the period of strategic defensive, right? But we could very soon, and I mean, I'm thinking in the next 5 years, we're going to enter a period where the intense divisions within the ruling class and the intense crisis of our society will be intense enough that not only will it be possible for an illiberal revolutionary movement to become massive, but it will become necessary. It will become something that many people are relying on for their mere survival. We have to have the foundations built. We have to have the ark built before Noah's ark, before the flood, right? We have to be Noah. We have to build the ark before the flood. That's how these things work, right? So yeah, I'm going to keep organizing and I'm going to keep doing this. And, I urge you to fight against that hand that is coming back, that wants to pull you back into living biologically. Fight against it. It's not easy, and also keep in mind that life circumstances change. Look, there was a period in my life. I'll just end this. I could talk about this stuff all night. There was a period in my life. There have been 2 periods in my adult life where I was not very politically active. the first period was when I was in college, right? Well, the first year of college, I was very, very heavily involved in one communist group. And then I joined another communist group. And for the first year I was in that communist group, I was very, very involved. But this communist group was old and they weren't as active as the group I was in. And, I was in college and, I slowed down, and I went to meetings, but I wasn't as active. And I ended up, had a relationship, I got engaged and all kinds of stuff. But then ultimately, I ended up getting back into activism and moving to New York City. But there was about a 2.5 year period where I was very inactive. I was still interested in politics in the same way. But in terms of going to stuff, I mean, I had a romantic relationship and I had some friendships at my college that I was investing much more time in. I just whatever. And that happens. Right. And then, after I left the Workers' World Party, when I was working for RT, for the first couple of years that I was working for RT, I tweeted a lot about politics. I made a Facebook post about politics. I reported on politics for my job, but I really wasn't doing much organizing other than, meeting up with people and talking to them. But something in me said, you have to keep doing this. And I started organizing the classes, and then I started streaming. I started the channel. I started streaming regularly on this channel, and one thing led to another. And now, first we had Students and Youth for a New America, and now we have CPI. And that, I came back to this, right? And I will come back to this because I know that this is part of my identity. This is part of who I am. This is just how my personality has developed, right? I am an activist my entire adult life. I mean, I moved out of my parents' house to be an activist, I am going to keep doing this. But even in my own life, right, there have been little 2 to 3 year periods where, and that life circumstances are something that every revolutionary activist struggles with, right? Look, you have to pay the bills, right? You have to take care of family. You have obligations, and not all of us can be active all the time. And that, to be active sometimes, on the one hand, requires sacrifices that only you can really choose to make. You shouldn't make them because somebody else tells you it's your obligation. But sometimes, it requires, making great personal sacrifices in terms of life and relationships. And at other times, it's just the way things are, right? You have to focus on getting your life in order, and that's fine. And no one says you're a bad person for that. And nobody, no one is judging you because of that. It just is, right? I don't know. And it's a struggle. How can I have a life where I can continue to be active, right? That is a question that a lot of us wrangle with, and it's not a question that is easily answered. It's a struggle that we're all on. Look, I would like there to be a revolutionary organization because I know it is necessary, and I know it, and I also know that it is it is my purpose and all of that. I would encourage you to go read. If you want to understand kind of my thinking on this, on a number of topics, but especially on this particular topic, read Letter to Bob Avakian, right? Because the first communist group I was around was the RCP, the Revolutionary Communist Party. I vehemently disagree with their worldview, on many layers. But I did write this letter to Bob Avakian that is a polemic against the leader of the RCP, but I praise him for what he did effectively. And at the end, I thank him for getting me involved in this life, in this movement. As much as I don't agree with him now and all of that, I think about who I was and how this movement changed me as a person. And, I take his views apart and I argue with him about a lot of things. I take him to task for being an atheist. I take him to task for his international positions and the way he's embracing Trump derangement syndrome and all of that. But I ultimately talk about what it means to be in a movement and how lucky I am that, that as much as his group is fucked up and weird, it got me into this. It got me into this lifestyle, and this is the way I am. I am an activist. I am an organizer. I'm not, the party is the most precious thing. The organization is the most precious thing. So on that note, folks, Names and locations. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. 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 Who is with us? Denver and Minnesota. Welcome. John McCarthy in Chicago. Luca in Singapore. Derry, New Hampshire. Very good. Brian Clark in Kansas City. Brooklyn, Phil in the house. Ed in Louisville. Kew Gardens, New York. Charles in Brooklyn. Alex in Brazil. Scott in Maryland. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Diana in Orlando, Florida. Mr. Wonderful from Qantas. All right, names and locations. St. David's, Bermuda. Welcome, St. David in Bermuda. Names and locations. Names and location. Nasser Dinesh in Pasadena. Welcome, Nasser. Jacob in Wisconsin. Western Illinois. Gavin Lockhart. Saviero Falana in Mexico. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations. Rose in the Bering Strait Tunnel. Well, it's not built yet, so I hope it's not too watery down there. Keep warm in the water, in that cold water, and it's a lot of intense current too. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Hempcar. Jacob from Wisconsin. Ha ha ha. Yusuf from Durham, North Carolina. All right. So I do want to remind you all that there are 3 ways now. 3 different ways that you can send questions. We only have 1 question. We have 2 questions so far. Right? 1 came on Cash App. Oh, no, we have 3 questions. Wow. Okay. All right. So we have quite a few questions, but I'm going to still give you all 1 more chance. I see Richard's question that he sent in. Richard's question. I see a question from ACFA. I see his question on Buy Me a Coffee. I see Checkpoint Charlie's question. All right. Okay. And then we also have Leo Messi, who sent his question on Rumble Rant. So we got quite a few questions that have come in. That's good. I will give you all a reminder. There is another way to send a question. There are 3 ways you can send questions. We're always taking more questions. Questions can be sent via Rumble Rants on the Rumble. You can Cash App me at Caleb Maupin 22 on Cash App, or you can buy me a coffee at Caleb Maupin. Buy me a coffee, Caleb Maupin. Those are the 3 ways to send questions. So we have quite a few questions that have already come in, which is great. But I'm going to give you all 1 more chance to send a question while I put on a song. I'm going to put on, I figure it's probably appropriate. I'm going to put on the Canadian Communist song, "The Party is the Most Precious Thing," because I think that kind of fits what I was talking about for the last hour and 37 minutes. So I'm going to put on "The Party is the Most Precious Thing." If you got more questions, send them in. Here we go.
Plant the party seeds in every factory, Bolshevize her ranks, relentlessly stand firm in her defense against the enemy. For the party is the most precious thing, the party is the most precious thing. Our party smashes every bar to progress in her way, voicing the aspirations of the proletariat today. Her bold leadership gives us the strength to smash the chains that bind our hands and build our Canada as a strong, free, socialist land. Plant the party seeds in every factory, Bolshevize her ranks, relentlessly stand firm in her defense against the enemy. For the party is the most precious thing, the party is the most precious thing. She courageously exposes all who serve the enemy, casting out the refuse of their backward philosophy. When our party speaks, it's with the voice of Marxism, Leninism in command, the unyielding voice of science, She is a rock among the shifting sands. Plant the party seeds in every factory, Bolshevize her ranks, relentlessly stand firm in her defense against the enemy. For the party is the most precious thing, the party is the most precious thing. The cowards and deserters left behind by our advance, the traitors screaming frenzied curses from a safe distance. Our party's progress blocks their way, they have to run to save their skins, or fire will consume them and throw their ashes to the winds. Plant the party seeds in every factory, Bolshevize her ranks, relentlessly stand firm in her defense against the enemy. For the party is the most precious thing, the party is the most precious thing. The workers and oppressed battle hard in self-defense. The party leads their struggles toward the mighty class offense, to wrest the power from the exploiter's hand and seize the reins of our destiny. This is Canada's contribution to liberate humanity. Plant the party seeds in every factory, Bolshevize her ranks, relentlessly stand firm in her defense against the enemy. For the party is the most precious thing, the party is the most precious thing. Plant the party seeds in every factory, Bolshevize her ranks, relentlessly stand firm in her defense against the enemy. For the party is the most precious thing, the party is the most precious thing.
Righty. Great. So I'm now answering people's questions. And thank you to everyone who sent a question via Buy Me a Coffee. 2 people have done that. And the first question comes from, I am an Air Canada flight attendant on my 3rd day of picketing during a strike. The employer refused to bargain with our union and instead relied on government intervention. Our union leaders ripped up the government order. It's now a wildcat strike. I've never been so proud. I hope all workers can experience what I've been experiencing in the last few days. Well, that's really tremendous. That's great. I'm looking this up. I guess the Air Canada Flight Attendants Union has been declared illegal. The Air Canada CEO says it's amazed at this unlawful strike, and that I know the airline industry has been really awful, to employees. I mean, the way that airline pilots get paid, the way, I know somebody who's a flight attendant who gets paid horrendously, and I guess she only gets full pay when the plane is actually in the air. And there's so much time that, they spend at the airport waiting to fly or whatever, and they only get minimum wage for that. And, that's, I hope that it would be great if somebody could do some research, or if there's a video I could show. I'd like to support the air traffic, the Air Canada flight attendants in any way that I can, standing up against austerity and against an anti-labor law that forbids their right to strike, right? It looks like they're declaring it illegal, but they're striking anyway. You cannot afford to make a living on being a flight attendant. Yeah, I know somebody who told me basically that, someone who became a flight attendant, somebody in my little circle of people that I know, and they told me basically that you can't, they tell you, oh, you get so much this an hour, but you only get it when the plane is actually in the air, and it's a very, very low wage job, and that, I'd like to learn more about this struggle. I'd like to promote the struggle of the Canadian flight attendants. Anything I can do. It sounds like an important issue. I'd love to highlight the struggle of the flight attendants of Air Canada. And thank you, for sending in your question. And I appreciate that. Now, Checkpoint Charlie says, insightful, constructive perspective. For your health, ditch the cola for Olipop vintage cola, cherry cola, classic root beer, etc. Well, I appreciate you looking out for my health, Checkpoint Charlie. I'll just be honest. My addiction to a certain unnamed diet beverage, I know that it's not good for me, right? I don't smoke cigarettes. I don't even drink alcohol. And I've never used any illegal substance. It's weird. You'd think that would have been the first thing I did when I got out of my parents' household, but that's not how it worked out. These communist groups tend to not let you use drugs. And I also tend to be very, I don't know. I'm a very, if I do things in a certain way, it's very hard to get me to do them in another way. I mean, I do make big lifestyle changes sometimes, but unnamed diet beverage, I cannot drink regular cola. Right. I drink the kind with artificial sweetener in it, but it's not good for you. Right. And many people have pointed out that stuff is not good for your liver. That stuff is not good for you in a number of ways. Right. I know I try to drink lots of water to balance it out because I know that it can cause, it's linked to kidney stones and things like that. And, it's not a healthy habit. It's a vice. But that caffeine that I get from unnamed diet beverage, that's what gets me through the day. And the president does it, right? The president of the United States drinks 6 Diet Cokes a day as well. So there we go. I'm just kidding. I mean, but it is interesting that President Trump and I both have the same vice. I know it's not good for me, but it's just compulsive. I will say, though, it is not, the sugar in soda is something that I have issues with. I can only drink 1 glass of regular. First of all, I don't drink regular Coke. I just don't do it. I just can't stand it now that I drink diet. Regular Coke tastes disgusting to me. It's like drinking syrup, right? I can occasionally have a Sprite or a ginger ale, but I can only drink 1 of them because the sugar is too much, right? There's too much sugar in it, right? But unnamed diet beverage, I can drink it all day long, right? And I do, and it gives me energy, and I appreciate the caffeine and all of that. But it's a vice, right? Just like people who drink coffee compulsively. I never developed a taste for coffee. It's not something I'm proud of. It's not something I want to encourage people to take on as their own, right? It's a vice. It is what it is. You know what I'm saying? But it is my particular vice. And, it's not, we all do things that we're not thrilled about. Right. And we all do things that we would not encourage other people to do. Right. Now, obviously some people are more than that. And it is important to try and live true to your principles. Right. One thing that I don't do, and people have accused me relentlessly of doing this, I do not do this, is tell people how to live their sex life. I have, it's none of my business. If you're married, if you're not married, if you're straight, if you're gay, if you're polyamorous, it's none of my goddamn business. I have never, ever, 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 ever on this stream told people how they should live their life. I have said in the past that people were probably healthier in the age when people were happier, I thought, and I believe they were in the age of monogamy, when people were just monogamous, right? And I believe that in the age when monogamy was just kind of the norm and people got married and had sex within marriages, people were a lot happier because there was a lot less ambiguity. That said, I have never gone around condemning people for the way they live their life. And people have tried to corner me on issues on various issues. And I've always said, this is something we all have to figure out on our own. We live in a society where people are not happy, but pornography is everywhere and society is much more sexual. And, this is something you have to navigate for yourself. And, if I were to go around telling people you should choose this lifestyle, it's just not something I'm comfortable doing. Maybe your religious leader can do that. Your pastor can do that. Your priest can do that. Maybe your psychologist, your therapist can help you do that. But if you want that from me, I'm not going to do it. People have desperately tried to get me to take a position on the sex work thing. My position on sex work has always been twofold. Number one, right? The idea of criminalizing sex workers is wrong, right? the idea that women or men or anyone who engages in that kind of work should go to jail for doing that, no, right? The idea that that should be criminalized, no, right? I don't think it should be criminalized. On the other hand, I think that some of the glorification of sex work that we get from the left is insensitive, because human trafficking is a horrendous thing. Pimps, a lot of what goes on, I would say the majority of what goes on in what you might call sex work is not good. Now, there is obviously a new thing nowadays where there are people that engage in what we would call sex work under different conditions, and that's not my business. But a lot of the glorification of sex work kind of, overlooks what it is for a lot of people who engage in it, right? And so my position is live and let live. I think if people want to engage in that kind of work of their own free will, it's not my business to tell them not to, and it's not my business. It has nothing to do with, it's just not for me to whatever, you know what I'm saying? On the other hand, I will acknowledge that for most people in the world that are involved in that kind of stuff, it's something very different than what these, people that are doing it of their own free will, et cetera, are doing. And that's all I've ever said. And on the LGBT thing, again, you have the right to live your life however you want. And I'm not here to tell you, that's something you got to figure out. If for religious reasons you personally feel that's wrong, that's your business, right? If you feel that, a way you are as a result of trauma or whatever, and, and that affects how you want to choose to live your life, that's your business. I'm not here to tell anyone about how to live that aspect of their life. And it's funny because both sides, there's a new trend of people that are like very, very socially conservative, and they have desperately tried to, they've condemned me. It's cringe that he's neutral on these issues. Why won't he condemn pornography and calling for how are you going to outlaw pornography? I mean, how does that work right nowadays with the internet and with all that? How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? I don't understand I understand that you feel pornography is wrong in principle. Okay. That's an ethical debate you're welcome to have, but how do you outlaw pornography? How does that work? Right. I don't understand that. And because I don't call for outlawing pornography, because I don't condemn LGBT people or whatever, because I don't condemn these things, there's people who get mad at me. On the other hand, though, I've been widely canceled because I am not going to become a trans rights activist. Look, when it comes to women's sports, when it comes to, children being given surgeries and stuff, I think there's some very fair criticism of that stuff. That said, if somebody as an adult wants to do that, it's none of my business. And that, I don't want to make it, erase that person's experience. But at the same time, the women's sports thing, I could understand some concerns there, and it's just, I'm just not interested in talking about this stuff. I really am not. I'm just not interested in talking about it. Right. I'm not. Right. I got interested in this stuff because I want to oppose the march toward World War III. I got interested in this stuff because I want to fight for working families, etc. And I just, and people get so fired up about this stuff, right? They get so emotional. And it's just like, I don't feel a need to get fired up about this, right? Sex workers who are doing it of their own free will, they don't hurt me in any way. If you want to have a complex ethical and moral debate about whether or not that's right, feel free, and like I said, I feel like a generation or two ago when monogamy was the norm, a lot of people were a lot happier, but that's not the world we live in anymore. And, I'm not going to make it my mission to try and impose that world on anybody. But, it's just, I just don't care, right? I just don't want to talk about it. And on the other hand, I get people, Caleb, why won't you fight for trans people and all that? Well, if anyone is bullying trans people, if anyone is telling trans people they don't have a right to, as an adult, get their surgeries, they don't have a right to exist and walk around as trans people. I see trans people on the subways all the time in New York City. Right. And yeah, if somebody were saying, oh, that's a trans person beating them up, which does happen. I'm against that, and that's wrong, and that person should be jailed for attacking a trans person. And if, trans people should have just as much rights as anybody else, and they shouldn't be kicked out of their houses for being trans. Their parents should respect them and shouldn't put them in hospitals or whatever. I am against hurting people. I am against people being bullied. I am against things like that, but I'm also not going to make it my cause. And I'm not going to, say, oh, this is what we should promote and we should encourage people to be this way. And, oh, yes, women should have to have people in locker rooms. And I'm just not going to go there. I just don't care about those issues. And those issues are so emotional and fiery. And I just don't care. I just, it's somebody else's battle to fight. It really is, right? It's somebody else's battle to fight. It's not my battle to fight, right? And I'm interested in opposing imperialism, opposing war, fighting for working families, demanding that the banks, factories, and industries be organized. And I just don't want to talk about whether or not it's right for, there to be internet porn, because there's going to be, that's just how things are. And I'm not interested in waging some kind of moral and ethical crusade about these things. And there are things in this world that people do that they're not proud of, like me drinking a lot of unnamed diet beverage. Is that really good for me? No. Right? I guess that's the point I was getting. Is that really good for me to drink so much unnamed diet beverage? No. Right? Is it something that I would go around promoting? Look, I'm doing that. No. But is it something I'm going to stop doing anytime soon? Probably not. And that's that. And that there are a lot of things in this world that are both wrong that I participate in. Right? And there are things in this world that I do know are wrong that I do participate in. And that's not good, right? One of them is, I actively participate in filling my body up with aspartame. I drink unnamed diet beverage. I know that the health effects of it are not good, but I actively participate in it. That's the circumstances I'm in. That's the society I'm in. And to some degree or other, by drinking unnamed diet beverage compulsively, I am living at odds with my own principles. And, guilty as charged, right? But we all participate in things we don't morally and ethically agree with, right? And, think about it, right? Does the company that you work for do they engage in behavior that, if you work at a bank, do you think that bank is not exploiting people? You work there and you give them your labor. We live in a society, and participating in that society to some degree or other means sometimes making choices that one could argue are against your principles. And maybe they are, and maybe they aren't. But moralizing, and this kind of gets down to my difference with the woke people, moralizing everything is not the point. There was somebody I knew years ago. Well, anyway, somebody I knew years ago, and they were looking for a job, and they said, well, they couldn't have a job where they worked in a store and handled money because they don't believe in capitalism. And I was like, what? And I said, yeah, I don't believe in capitalism. So I can't be I can't work at Whole Foods because I would take money from people. I don't believe in capitalism. I said, that's not what anti-capitalism is about. You can work at Whole Foods. Well, I don't believe in capitalism. I said, no. Capitalism is the worker, and it's like, there's this politics that says that if you don't agree with something, you must not participate in it or you're a hypocrite. No. Wrong. Right. And, we all do things that are against our principles. We all participate in some things that we don't believe in. Look, I drink Diet Coke, right? The Coke Corporation is an evil corporation. But you know what? I also eat food that comes from Monsanto. I'm sure. Not directly. I don't know. There's no product I buy that says Monsanto on it. But, it's just, this whole, yeah. Anyway, I think you all get my point. That, if we start demanding that people engage in certain, I'm a better anarchist than you. Exactly. We start demanding that people engage in certain lifestyle choices. You must do this, right? You must condemn that. You must do, it's who gets to decide? Who gets to decide? And I just, one of these leftist groups, I saw this, and it's one of these groups that is not a real organization. It's an online organization. I'll just throw this out there. I hope no one knows who I'm talking about. I think some of you do. They made a whole big deal about how they advocate banning pornography. And I looked at that and I just laughed. And they had this whole meme, we are going to outlaw pornography and all this. And I just laughed. Why? Because that's how you can tell they're an online organization. They're never going to be a real organization. Do you know, if you're building a real organization and you make such a big deal about that, you know what you're introducing into your organization right then. You do realize that, like, if a man and a woman in your organization start dating, you're suddenly, as an organization, going to have to be sorting out disagreements that you don't want to be sorting out. Let me just put it that way, right? Somebody made a meme claiming that CPI, regulates people's lives. No, we don't. And it's just like, if your organization, your position is, we will ban pornography, we forbid our members from looking at pornography. It's like, do you really want to regulate that aspect of people's lives? You really want to have to deal with that inside your organization, right? Any real organization in our time is going to say, that's not our business, right? But an internet group, no one knows anything, right? No one knows anybody else. They just retweet each other, so it's fine. You know what I'm saying? But a real activist organization where there's people in that organization who will date each other, who will break up, who are in that group together, and they're expecting the organization to regulate that aspect of people's lives. Do you realize what a can of worms that is for an organization? Do you realize what you are bringing into your organization now? You know what I'm saying? No. I mean, no serious activist group is going to say, okay, and that's the thing, right? If you announce to the world, we will ban pornography, we forbid our members from using pornography, you're going to have to enforce that. And if it's a real organization, people in the group really know each other and really start dating and really start living together and really start breaking up, and you're going to have to enforce that. And do you really want to have to enforce that? Do you know what that means? But if you're not a real organization, it's not a problem, right? If it's just an internet club that people join, yeah, fine. Okay. Good for you. But in a real organization, and that's how you can tell they're not a real organization, among other things. This group is not a real organization. But the fact that they would even consider trying to regulate that aspect of people's lives and think that they could handle what that actually means organizationally, no, they won't. To say that as an internet group, and then all the liberals flip out and attack you, and then you get to go, yeah, we really do believe in that. It's just internet meme crap, all right? And that's all it is. It's very effective meme stuff. They got a lot of attention from people. Liberals called them out, and they looked badass, and they're rad femmes and all that. But no, yeah, a real organization. If you include that in the platform of a real organization that has real people that are actually working with each other in it, you're going to have to enforce that. And that's going to open the door to scrutinizing people's private lives and dealing with all kinds of interpersonal drama that it's going to be a headache to deal with. And as someone who studies organizations and real life movements, I saw that and I laughed and I said, they have no idea what they're doing, right? And they don't. And that's fine. That's fine. And to some degree or other, I appreciate them existing because they're like a lightning rod. All the people that used to stalk CPI and harass CPI are now stalking and harassing them. And that's great. They're chronically online and they want to win the internet and all that. And now we can focus on doing, it is ridiculous to think you can enforce such personal matters. And do you know what an organizational nightmare it would be to try it? I mean, it's ridiculous. And, they're a chronically online thing. They're just an internet fandom. And I appreciate them existing because now CPI can build the real organization we're building. Our membership is rising. People are joining. We're getting stuff done around the country. And we're doing the same thing we've always been doing. But now when we do it, we don't have to deal with, the woke internet, attacking us every time we do it and making us the center of attention. We can just do it. Right. And that's a good thing, right? Let other people be the lightning rod for the internet hate. So we can just carry out the operations that we're trying to carry out, get shit done like we need to get done, and let other people, do what they need to do, right? You know, other people that are whatever. Anyway, moving on to the next question. And thank you. And let me remind you, questions can be sent 3 ways now, through Rumble Rants, you know, through Cash App, Caleb Bompa 22, or Buy Me a Coffee. Those are the 3 ways. So next, I'm going to do the Cash App question that came in, and then I'll get to the Rumble Rants. Richard Fernando says, thoughts on Trump using the National Guard and ICE? Well, I think these are separate questions. The ICE, well, first of all, first point, I believe, firstly, in due process. Everyone has the right to due process. Okay, that's just basic, right? If somebody is in the country illegally and has committed the most horrendous crime, you can arrest them, put them in prison for that horrendous crime, and then deport them from the country for it. But you have to have due process. You have to take them for a judge. You have to accuse them of being in the country illegally. You have to make a deportation case against them. You have to charge them with the crime. They have the opportunity to defend themselves. That's just basic. You're a person in America, right? You have what's called due process. And ICE not following due process is indefensible. It's completely indefensible. Period. Now, I mean, ICE, from what I understand, they do have the right to arrest people as federal officers if they're obstructing their activities, right? Like, you know, that I guess, right? Like if the FBI is going to carry out an FBI raid and somebody's harassing them, they have the right to arrest them in order to carry out their raid as law enforcement. Okay, but to whatever extent ICE is not following due process, I'm against that. I am for due process. And in a way, some of the conversation around ICE has been very unhelpful, because one of the big problems with how ICE is conducting itself is that ICE is violating due process, and that the conversation immediately comes to, no one is illegal. We're living on stolen land. America's a racist country. And it's like, guys, all right, now we can't, now, you know, anyone who's not a woke activist, you've lost them. And we can't debate the fact that, you know, so there's that, right? But that said, right, I am in favor of due process. The National Guard thing, I am not, you know, Trump sent the federal troops to California because the protests against ICE were getting violent, and he alleged they were interfering with ICE's operations. ICE's operations were violating due process rights, were illegal. So that situation, I kind of agree with the protesters. I don't agree that immigrants should be demonized. I don't think, you know, that raids on immigrant communities are a good thing. And I don't think that that mass deportations are going to solve the issue. And, you know, I've stated my position on immigration, that ultimately this problem is bigger, and that everything right-wingers want to do about immigration doesn't make it better. But there is a problem. The fact that thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people can't live in their own country and flee to the United States, that's a problem. And the answer to that problem is economic development. So there's that. The issue of the National Guard and the military working with the DC police, you know, if they were, I'm not seeing the problem there. Okay, I'll just be honest with you. I'm not seeing the problem there, right? You know, people, they said it was a coup. How is this a coup, right? DC is not a state. It's federal territory. If you get arrested by the DC police, you end up in a federal facility anyway. And so Trump, you know, had the federal military people work with the DC police to enforce the law in the DC area because there was a crime wave, because he was trying to make things safer on the streets of DC. I don't see the problem there. I mean, again, if these DC police were murdering or terrorizing young black people and violating their rights, I would be opposed to it. And if that is happening, I'm against it. But as I see it, though, the Trump, you know, using the military to stabilize the streets of DC, I'm not opposed to that. I don't see anything wrong there. And I honestly think it's because he feared a coup attempt as he was making peace with Russia. I'll just be honest with you. The timing of it is interesting. And just when he's going to Alaska, he's also sending the police, he's sending the military to make sure that there's no attempted coup. And look, after January 6th, what did they do? They had federal police out, you know, big metal fences around the Capitol, and National Guard on the streets after January 6th. And it's like Trump right now, he's doing things that Biden did, that he did in his first term, that Obama did, and they're calling it authoritarianism, like gerrymandering. That has gone on since the beginning of politics in America, but they're treating it like, oh my God, they're redrawing the congressional districts of Texas. Of course they are. That's called gerrymandering. That's what every party does. That's been in American politics since the beginning of time, as you redraw the maps of the congressional districts to get what you want, right? It's not unconstitutional in DC. He's threatening to do it in other cities where it would be unconstitutional. Okay, right? And it's part of the ICE thing, which is ICE is violating people's rights. So, my position on that is nuanced, but I'm horrified by a lot of what ICE is doing. I'm honest with you. What ICE is doing, it's horrifying. And what's scary is the dissent against it is not serious, because if the dissent against it was serious, the dissent would focus on the fact that they're doing illegal things. But the dissent against it is just this shrill, America is racist. And so we can't talk about the illegal things that they're doing. It's almost like the liberal order doesn't actually want to stop. They're fine with, people being detained without charges. They're fine with that, but they also just hate Trump. And so they're trying to let him get away with it by having the protests be this shrill liberal thing that just lets everyone get their anger out, and then they proceed. We should be arguing about ICE violating people's due process rights. Why are we not arguing about that? Right? Yeah. And, Patriot Act, et cetera. This has been going on since 9/11, essentially. The U.S. government has declared, oh, yeah, we don't have to, we can hold people without charges. We can declare people enemy combatants. Now we can have ICE detain them. That's a fucking problem. Right? That is a fucking problem. And now, ICE is doing this, and just like we should have talked about, like the Patriot Act, all this, we should fight it on those grounds, but we're fighting it on the grounds of no one is illegal. We're living on stolen land. Okay. All right. Well, now that's one way to just make sure it goes on, because, that's not a legal argument. That's not so it's frustrating to me. But yeah, I'm very, 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 very concerned about what ICE is doing, and I'm very opposed to what ICE is doing. Obviously we have the right to enforce immigration laws. We don't have the right to violate due process. We shouldn't be sending people to, El Salvador. I'm glad that got turned off, and it scares me, honestly. And I wish people were fighting that on the grounds that it could actually be stopped. Trump sending the military to DC. Again, what's wrong with that? And the gerrymandering in Texas. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So I don't know. I don't know. We're in a messy, messy time politically. We're in a messy, messy time politically. That's all I can say. That's all I can say. All right. So now we're going to go to the Rumble rants. So Leo Messi says, Xinjiang style camps as a solution for young men interested in the Tate brothers. Yeah, that's hilarious. Okay. Well, first of all, the Uyghur thing, like the idea that they were, rounding up young Muslims and brainwashing them. And it was largely, there's a big problem in the Uyghur Islamic regions of China that, pan-Turkism was being taught in the schools, and that an anti-Chinese, anti-communist ideology was being widely promoted. And there was kind of an Islamist insurgency. So the Chinese government was moving in to try and stabilize things. One of the main things they did was they built mosques and they built seminaries for people that were not promoting terrorism, right? The Chinese government it didn't say Muslims are all evil Islamist terrorism. They said, look, right, obviously we have a problem in this region with some of the Muslims that think that we should get on trains and knife people, or think that we should have violent terrorist attacks to break the Muslim regions of China away and make them part of Turkey or whatever. So based on that, they implemented a program, and what they did was that, they started providing job training to people. And part of their job training was to learn to be Muslims in a way that didn't advocate terrorism. And they funded and they built thousands of mosques, and they trained all kinds of people, got government paychecks to be, imams and promote Islam. But they did it, an Islam that was not promoting terrorism. That's good. Great. And I've talked about this before. And then somebody made a response video to me that was just so stupid. And they said, well, it's not real Islam, Caleb. It's just communism dressed up as Islam. Wah, wah, wah. And it's like, I'm not in a position to argue with anyone about who's a real Muslim. I'm not a Muslim. But it's like, okay, all right. So it's, all right. So, but, the Chinese government, the main way that they fought the Uyghur thing is with jobs. It's with jobs. They've been investing, right? They've been investing and providing economic opportunity. And that's the main thing that's gotten the people there out of radicalism. But, the idea that they were committing a genocide, the birth rate among Uyghurs, ethnic Uyghurs that are the Muslim ethnic minority in those regions has actually gone up, right? And that, they're not wiping them out. They're having more children. And so it's just, terrorism of any kind is bad, right? And if you have a region where there's Islamic terrorism going on and you bring in a lot of imams and religious leaders that are not promoting terrorism, and you promote that, and you provide job training to people, and you give people that might get involved in that stuff job training, but part of it is to learn an interpretation of Islam that doesn't promote, terrorism. I don't understand what's wrong with that. And you tell me they're wiping them out. Well, if they're wiping them out, why is their birth rate going up? That doesn't make sense. And, it's like that whole Uyghur thing, Kim Iverson and Max Blumenthal have done great work. And the idea they're committing some kind of genocide against the Uyghurs, that's not happening. That's not happening. For a long time, because of Afghanistan, right? And it really started out because of Afghanistan. This is fascinating. The Soviet Union and China had their falling out. And in Afghanistan, the USA was funding Islamic extremists to fight against the Soviet Union. China was aligned with the United States against the Soviet Union, and China borders Afghanistan. So China let a lot of Islamic extremists set up shop to fight the Soviet Union. And they not only were they going over the border into Afghanistan to fight the Soviet Union, but they were building, mosques that promoted an Islamist Wahhabi ideology and stuff like that. And now, a generation later, you've got a layer of people in the Islamic regions who've been raised to hate the Chinese government, been raised to think, well, I'm not Chinese, I'm a Turk. I'm actually Turkish, which is, absurd. I'm actually Turkish, and it's pan-Turkism and Wahhabi Islam and stuff. And so they have a problem. And so they're dealing with the problem. But they're not committing genocide, and they're not outlawing Islam. They're just, rooting out the fact that a terrorist ideology, they let it set up shop to fight the Soviet Union. And as a result, when you let terrorists set up shop, they set up shop. And so you have to fix things. That's what I said. Should we do to young men who are interested in Andrew Tate shit? No, we shouldn't. No, we shouldn't, Leo. No, we shouldn't. Right now, Andrew Tate, he's a social media personality. And I do not understand Andrew Tate, and I'm not a lifestyle influencer. And, this is why, I'm not trying to win the internet. I am not trying to win the internet. I'm not here to tell anyone how to live their life. I'm not, and this is not dude, bro. Andrew Tate, everything I read about him is like, okay. I'm not sure he's necessarily guilty of the crimes he's been accused of or whatever. But if you look at what he brags about doing with Pimp University and all of that, it's pretty gross. I don't understand. And I'll tell you one thing I don't understand. If I'm so awful because I'm accused of whatever, of having some conversations with people or whatever, how is Andrew Tate okay? Explain that one to me. Right? If I'm untouchable because whatever gossip is out there, right? If you look at the details, I'm accused of almost nothing, right? But Andrew Tate, right, who is like very clearly, how does that work? How does that work? But it makes perfect sense to me. He's cool on the internet, right? That's what it's about, right? And that's all these fucking idiots care about. They don't want to build a real movement. They're not building a real movement. They just want to be internet famous, right? And so for a period, I was being widely demonized. A demonization campaign was engineered against me that was very vicious, digging into private aspects of my life and lying about them and all kinds of stuff. And so I was getting a lot of negative attention. And so, these people wanted attention for themselves. They joined the mob against me, right? That's all that happened. And Andrew Tate, even though he's quite despicable, he gets a lot of positive attention. He's internet famous, so he's okay. And that's, again, these people have no principles. These people are awful. And this is why we just need to stop thinking about them, right? Because, I mean, again, we're building a real movement here. We're not building an internet fandom, right? And, yeah, I mean, when it comes to being famous on social media, Andrew Tate, hey, he's better than me, right? I mean, he is way more famous than I am. I cannot compete with him. When it comes to, being somebody that people, young men on the internet love to watch and feel great about watching, by all means, Andrew Tate, he won the internet, right? Compared to me, Andrew Tate has won the internet 1,000, 1,000,000 times than I have. So, if that's what matters to you, go listen to Andrew Tate, by all means, right? Andrew Tate is far my superior. Now, if you can't understand why what I'm offering here is a lot more fucking valuable than what fucking Andrew Tate offers, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to tell you, right? And that there are a number of people, some of whom even claim to agree with what we preach on here, that somehow think that what Andrew Tate is doing is more valuable than what we do here. And if that's you, be gone. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, right? And there are other people, and this is my favorite, who think the way to spread these ideas that we promote on here is to adopt Andrew Tate messaging. Seriously, that is what they think we should be doing. And again, if that's what you want to do, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Great. Have fun with that. We're not going to do that. And, look, there are people who just don't belong in our community. I generally want to be welcome and accepting of everybody, but no chasing after people is a big rule. I don't chase after people anymore. If people say they don't want to be involved, be gone, number one. And number two, look, I mean, if somebody is so deluded that they think that the way to spread the ideas that we promote on here is to mimic Andrew Tate in some way, you got your head pretty far up your ass, right? We are not going to do that. And I'm not going to waste, we're just not going to do that, right? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, right? But it might get you attention on the internet. Oh, I might get internet famous like Andrew Tate. Oh, great. And that and a quarter will get you a phone call, as they used to say. Nowadays, they don't have pay phones. People have cell phones, so that doesn't apply. But I mean, if that's your get rich quick scheme, is to, you're going to become the Andrew Tate of communism. Okay, good luck. Good luck. Have fun with that, right? And if you want to go listen to somebody or follow somebody, and that's their idea, good luck. Good luck. Anyway, that was an odd question you asked, Leo Messi. Does Canada have any solidly anti-imperialist groups? That's a good question. That is a good question. I don't know. For a while, there were a lot of people in the Communist Party of Canada that seemed anti-imperialist, but they all lost their minds over the trucker convoy. It was very disappointing. They just kind of, it was weird. There was a section of the Communist Party of Canada that seemed like it was good. And then the trucker convoy came along and they just, it's similar to how I have had to learn that when conservatives start with their anti-communism stuff, they're not even talking about what I believe. They're not. Right. I mean, it's not, I don't even argue, at our rally that we had in New York City, there was a guy from a Republican guy who was just walking by and agreed with us about what our rally was about. I handed him the bullhorn. He said a lot of anti-communist stuff, but he wasn't talking about what I believe. He was talking about Mamdani. He thinks Mamdani is a communist, and he is right that Mamdani's policies will be very, very bad for, will be very, very bad for the small businesses of the city. I don't disagree with a lot of what he said. I just don't, that's just not my understanding of what, Marxism is and all that. And it's like, I've had to get to the point where I'm not triggered by this anymore. Right. When I hear conservatives start talking about communism and all that, it's like part of me goes, ugh. It's frustrating, but at the point, I don't even call myself a communist anymore. I'm an innovationist. I believe in God. I have some fundamental differences with classic ML. But on top of that, you know, what they're talking about is woke teenagers who annoy me, and who do want what their caricature of Marxism is. And if I start interrupting them and saying, well, actually communism is this, they're going to find about 50 different people on the internet who call themselves communists who are saying exactly what they're arguing against. And so it's like, I've gotten to the point that, that when I hear conservatives talking against communism, I'm not triggered by it any longer, because it's not, they're not talking against me. They're talking against people that also annoy me. And that, what we preach as CPI is very unique at this point. It's not unique around the world. In the third world, it's pretty normal what we promote, right? We have the politics of Ibrahim Traore. We have the politics of Russia and China and Venezuela and Iran. But what we promote in the United States is very unique. And when a conservative starts ranting against communism, they're not talking about things we believe. They're talking about things that Mamdani believes. They're talking about things that Obama believes, right? And I don't agree with those things either. And I'm frustrated that they think that's the same thing, but it is what it is. So, it's unfortunate. But the trucker convoy, yeah, right. It's a bunch of conservative Canadians. And they were ranting against communism, and the Communist Party of Canada took it personally. And a lot of people that seemed pretty sensible in Canada, they just had such a vile reaction to that trucker convoy that, there's one of these guys, I forget what his name was. He wrote a number of anti-imperialist books. He was like a professor, and he wrote a book about Syria. He wrote a book about Israel, wrote a book about North Korea. I wrote reviews of his books. I really liked him. And then one day I see him tweeting against me, and this crazy, and he's calling me a Nazi and calling me a fascist. I'm like, what in the world is going on with this guy? Oh, he's mad at you for the trucker convoy. It's like, oh, okay. Well, I don't live in Canada, but, my position has been we should engage with anyone who's opposing the system. And, and it's too bad. I do know that there is a no to NATO group in Canada that seems pretty good. Right. And, we have some members in Canada who live in Canada that are members of CPI, and maybe they want to start a CPI Canada. I don't know. I'm not here to tell that. The group that I like to play the music of, the Communist Party of Canada, Marxist Leninist, I play their music from a really long time ago. Yeah, there you go. All right. Next question. Caleb, I disagree with you on DC. DC has had very few major RICOs. What's a RICO in my lifetime? And the murder rate in DC has been going down since 2024. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I still don't think what Trump is doing there is illegal, right? Even if you don't think there's proper cause for it, I don't see what Trump is doing in DC right now as illegal. There you go. But all right, well, it's been fun. I am, we're at about 2.5 hours in, and I am starting to lose my voice here, so I should probably cut this off soon. I will say I am going to start reading this book. I've been meaning to start reading this book on the stream. I'm going to start reading this book, my William Z. Foster and the Communist Party book. I'm going to start reading that on the stream soon. I've been meaning to do it for quite some time, and I just haven't been able to, to start it up. But that's my goal, is to eventually start reading this book. And I want to read. I have a lot of books, and I want to read them on the streams, right? And it's a way of getting the book out there, have audio books people can listen to and all of that. Book sales are very important. And I will say I'm selling a lot of books. I wake up and I'm selling quite a few books, and I'm working on another book. And, hopefully like tomorrow I can start reading this book. I want to eventually have the whole audio book, William Z. Foster and the Communist Party. I want to start reading it on these streams, but there you go. Join the Center for Political Innovation. We're doing great stuff around the country. And my absolute favorite book is Where is America Going? Oh, glad to hear that, Zach. Well, it's available in Chinese now. And it's a good book. It's quite a good book. There is an audio book that Tyler McConnell did. I haven't done an audio book of it myself, but I've been taking like sections of that book and making them small pamphlets. Like this is the first chapter of that book, basically. AI is not the problem, right? And so that's an audio book. I've been taking different sections from my longer books, etc. Oh, I'm reading Heavy Radicals, recommended from the last stream. Well, that's a good book. Yeah. Heavy Radicals, the FBI's War Against America's Maoists. It's a good book on the history of the RCP. Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. There you go. Yeah. So, okay, good. All right. Well, listen, folks, it's been fun. I'll be back. So yeah, we'll check in again tomorrow night. Hopefully, and we're always doing these different streams. So yeah, I'm very excited about the Center for Political Innovation and what we're doing. And I hope that you all can stay on the revolutionary road and not get demoralized. It's a daily struggle, but it's worth it. So there we go.
New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.